Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to AI45 Automation in 45 Minutes. This is a webinar organized by SSI SCHAEFER Asia, where we discuss and share some of the latest logistics solutions, trends, and best practices in automating and improving warehouse performance and operations. I'm Alison, and I'll be the host for the AI45 webinar series with SSI SCHAEFER. In case you are not aware, SSI SCHAEFER designs, develops, and manufactures systems for warehouses and industrial plants. As a world-leading provider of modular warehousing and logistics solutions, its portfolio includes manual and automated solutions for warehousing, conveying, picking, and sorting, plus technologies for waste management and recycling. In addition, SSI SCHAEFER is also a leading provider of modular software for in-house material flow. With over 83 years of experience, you can find SSI SCHAEFER across 6 continents. The headquarters is based in Germany, and the regional office for Asia Pacific and Middle Eastern Asia is based in Singapore. A short drive across the causeway, you can find the SSI SCHAEFER Asia's own production facility based in Malaysia, Simpang Rangam. On today's webinar's topic, manual to fully automated Rack Clad warehouse, we have a powerhouse duo in the session with me. So Mr. Chan Fong Chow, Director of Steelworks High Bay Warehouse, and Mr. Ramanathan Velayapan, Senior Logistics Solutions Consultant from SSI SCHAEFER. Mr. Chan, or sometimes we call him Chan, is a familiar face in the supply chain and logistics sector in Asia. Over the last 20 years of his career, he has consulted and led multiple turnkey projects in designing and building colossal Rack Clad and high bay warehouses in the region. Specializing in steelwork high bay warehouse, he has deployed Rack Clad solutions warehouses for different market sectors that transcend traditional or manual warehouses structures from time to time. Mr. Ramanathan, sometimes I call him Ram, is our Senior Logistics Solutions Consultant. He specializes in designing solutions using robotics and logistics automation fulfillment technologies in the field of e-commerce, food and retail, consumer goods, and manufacturing sectors. His eye for details and innovative approach towards smart logistics has accelerated the performance of many warehouse material flow in this region. So welcome Chan and Ram to AI45.
Thanks, Edison, for having me join you on this webinar. Ram, look forward to our discussion and sharing on the topic of automation with our audience.
Of course, Chan, I'm looking forward to the discussion as well. And thanks, Edison, for such a wonderful introduction.
You're welcome. So let's start. Okay, for a start on the evolution of the warehouses, over the last 30 years, we have seen how warehouses and supply chain management have evolved with technology. Warehouse today, they are definitely smarter, they are taller, and also more complex. Yet, at the same time, taking up lesser footprint physically and environmentally. So from an infrastructure perspective, we ask the both of you who are here with us today to share the development of warehouses in Asia and the latest technology used to construct these complex buildings.
I must say, in the last decade, we have seen the warehouse evolve into an integrated building that comes with a smart control or even power management tools. When you look back in history, warehouses are basically just a storage space for stock. But today, we are building automated warehouses that are more strategic towards the business and are definitely more complex. Material flow process is also heavily influenced by consumer, trend, and competitions. Well, listen, do you know that warehouses go back to the creation of granaries, where storehouse was built to just store grain during time of famine? In Germany, these store granaries are known as silo. Until today, we still use silo to represent Rack Clad warehouses in Europe.
Well, Chan, thanks for the little bit of history. But no, actually, I didn't know. But now that you say it, no wonder we hear the words used intermittently, differently across different parts of the world. Sometimes we hear silo, sometimes we hear rack clads, or sometimes we hear clad racks.
Now you know, isn't it? Okay, back to the slide. In 19th and 20th centuries, because of World War and Industrial Revolutions, we see the warehouse grew bigger in size and the need for warehouse was not limited to only grain storage anymore. Those days are still fondly remembered by how warehouse employees, by the experience, remember where the material were located and how stock was left in the warehouse. Eventually, IT and automation started to expand its way many warehouses infrastructure.
I mean, that's right, Chan. So this IT and automation became more and more common inside the warehouse in the last 1 or 2 decades, and warehouses evolved massively, and the industry has come a long way to adapt and evolve to this faster pace. And this mainly happened because of this one great phenomenon called the internet, and this has led to the globalization that we are experiencing now. I mean, imagine I can place an order online in Singapore to ship an iPhone, which is a product of a US-based company just manufactured in China, and I can send that iPhone to my grandmother, who's actually staying in a rural village back in southern India. Now, this is globalization, right? And this is possible because of various reasons. And one among the main reason is a good supply chain network. And obviously, to make this happen, some kind of automation became a norm inside the warehouse. I mean, any kind of automation, starting from a warehouse management system, an ERP system, to a fully automated picking and storage system. So moving on to future, what is 2021 and beyond in terms of evolution of warehouse? I mean, this is the beauty of humankind, right? I mean, just when we think that, things cannot get better than this, somehow we always find a way to make it better. And it applies for the warehouse as well. So we are moving towards IoT, that is Internet of Things. And historically, warehouse automation systems have always resided within the four walls on wired networks. And now this is changing towards a web-based or a cloud-based analytics to help manage the performance. So this means the logistic managers or operators can get more transparency on end-to-end supply chain.
Thanks, Ram. It's true though, we see a lot of technologies evolving through the warehouse evolution itself. And that brings me to the topic of future-proofing warehouses and e-commerce these days. Many of us here will definitely remember 2020 as the year where panic buying occurred in almost every part of the world. And Ram, how do you think a carefully planned warehouse would help businesses to navigate an entirely new set of complexities in the supply chain itself?
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right about the e-commerce part. So e-commerce has grown at least by a few folds in the last 2 decades. But this COVID-19 pandemic has taken things to the whole new level. I mean, who would have thought that getting a tissue would become an issue, right? Nobody would have thought that.
Yeah.
And I mean, we all remember the lockdown where the shops were closed. And I can definitely say that e-commerce platforms have helped the communities keep fed and employed during the crisis. I mean, as you can see this graph, people spend more time online browsing through grocery and food delivery compared to listening to music and watching videos. Now, this is huge, right? I mean, and thinking about it, last week I spent almost an hour trying to find out what sauce I should buy for my burger. I mean, the first step is you should find out what type you should buy, right? I mean, is it tomato sauce, chili sauce, or barbecue sauce, or whatever? Let's say I end up choosing tomato sauce, right? And now in tomato sauce, you have 10 different versions, chunky, French, Italian, the list goes on. And for every version, you have 4 different brands. So that's a total of 40 choices for a single product. So this report is not shocking for me. And this is reality. I mean, you don't get that luxury when you go to a grocery store nearby. The product range that these e-commerce platforms provide you is enormous. I'm not going to the discussion whether if it is good or not. I mean, that's how it is. So the question arises, so what does it mean for the businesses in general? I mean, not just the e-commerce, because for every market sector, the SKU is, it's getting bigger and bigger, and so is the storage volume. So planning a future-proof warehouse is extremely important at this time.
Right, those are very valid arguments on investing in future-proofing a logistics infrastructure or even the warehouses itself. And Chan, earlier on, you also mentioned a lot about silos and Rack Clad as complex infrastructure for businesses today. But bringing the question back to future-proofing, what does it actually take to future-proof warehouses today?
There are a lot of criteria for the future-proof warehouse. Let me start with the simple one first. Yeah, size of the warehouse. Like what Ram said earlier, to expand the number of SKU with a high storage volume, the warehouse will typically be huge. And by that means, a Rack Clad warehouse that can go as high as 45 meters. Then we'll come to the second point. It can be built anywhere around the world. Of course, we want it to be closer to our customer and geographically safe to operate. With that, third point is to ensure that the infrastructure is scalable and overall a cost-saving strategy for the future warehouse expansion.
I mean, to add on to Chan's points, and in terms of future-proofing the warehouse from an automation perspective, we are looking at 3 more points. And number 4 would be the operational performance. I mean, what kind of methodology or technology are you using to fulfill the order? Can you manage to meet the future growth in your warehouse at the current operation? And number 5 is space utilization. In many cities, space is always a constraint. Therefore, an optimum space utilization inside a warehouse is necessary. And are you using the space efficiently inside the warehouse? So number 6 would be the collaboration between the robots and the human beings. So is there a warehouse management system inside your warehouse that can act as a bridge between your inventory and operators? So these are the questions that will get you ready to future-proof your warehouse.
Thanks, Ram. So bringing back to future-proofing a warehouse again. So earlier on, Chan, when you said about having to have rackings in a warehouse itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talked a little bit about the size of the warehouse. So perhaps can you share a little bit on this detail?
Sure, I would love to, when I started with SSI SCHAEFER 26 years ago, we were excited to have a 25-meter high, 10,000 pair location warehouse project. Now, we are talking about a warehouse size of 100,000 pallets at a height of 40 meters or more, which is almost double the height with 10 times the storage capacity that would never have thought possible back then.
I mean, I agree with Chan. So, I mean, the inquiry that we get these days are more than 100,000 pallet locations. And this was not even the case 5 years back. Yeah.
Exactly. This trend translates into the bigger the warehouse, the better it is. And the Rack Clad solution have the edge to build big. And therefore, the demand of Rack Clad warehouse will grow.
I mean, Chan, sorry to interrupt. So you mentioned Rack Clad warehouses. For the benefit of our audience here, who are not very familiar with this term, do you want to explain what a Rack Clad is in layman terms?
Okay. In this case, let me ask Edison a question first. Okay. Why do we have a racking in the warehouse building?
I think it's just purely to store pallets, and that's why we need the rackings.
Okay, now imagine about this. What if there is no building? Can you have the racking in place? This is what we call a Rack Clad. It's a self-supporting storage rack system that can withstand the environmental forces and at the same time can be used to support the roof and wall facade. Due to its self-supporting nature, Rack Clad do not require building columns, and this makes Rack Clad solution more compact if we compare it against the conventional warehouse solutions.
And Chan, in that case, right, does it mean if they do not need a conventional outer building to shelf the racking, we will assume that it's more cost-friendly in building and construction time?
Wow, this is always an expectation from our customer. Of course, there will be cost saving from the total Rack Clad investment, but not all of it are from the building cost. Since Rack Clad solution use a smaller footprint, you can actually achieve additional saving from the areas such as cost of the land and the land tax as compared to a regular building itself. This is the additional benefits. Yeah. From a Rack Clad project, it doesn't mean that we can simply transfer it to the indoor racking to become the Rack Clad solutions.
And why can't we just simply do that?
Normally, racking inside the building is not affected by external factors such as rain or wind. But for a Rack Clad warehouse, this is not the case. Therefore, comprehensive detailed engineering must be done on the racking design to consider the impact of wind and rain through years of operations. We make sure it is safe to install the racking system in an open air environment, and it is stable to take all the external loads. One of the key elements of the Rack Clad solution is the construction time. We can usually start the project early when the first step is ready. But for the indoor high bay warehouse, you can only start the installation when the building is complete. So we are looking at a head start of 6 to 9 months for a Rack Clad installations.
So Chan, this is a very important point, but can you explain in detail why should we wait until the building is finished before we can start with the indoor racking installation?
As I mentioned before, Rack Clad is designed to take the wind load in order to install an open air environment. But the indoor racking is not designed for that purpose. Therefore, it's risky to start the installation before the building is finished. Do not underestimate the impact of wind. I have seen some indoor highway warehouse projects being blown down by unexpected strong wind when they think it's okay to carry out the storage system installation, even when the building wall is not fully covered. There's a difference between Rack Clad and indoor highway warehouse.
Right, Chan, with so many benefits that you have mentioned earlier on about how Rack Clad buildings or warehouses, they are compact, they take up smaller footprint, I have this burning question in my head. So can we assume that Rack Clad warehouses, they are smaller than normal warehouses?
Not really the case. In contradiction to your thought, they are actually huge. Instead of using the land space, a Rack Clad solution using the air space. When we compare a 45-meter Rack Clad to a conventional warehouse of less than 15 meters, the land space utilization go best with the Rack Clad solution. Using the smaller footprint, the other field of service such as chiller unit and M&E services will be scaled down accordingly.
Chan, the question we face often is, so what is the limit for such Rack Clad warehouses? Can we build anywhere else in the world? I mean, what if the wind speed is extremely high, or what if there is high seismic activity? Can we still build it?
The quick answer will be, we can build a Rack Clad warehouse anywhere in the world. But to operate from anywhere in the world, we first need to look at some geographical boundaries that we face in planning for Rack Clad infrastructure. Over the last few years, the occurrence of earthquake and typhoon has become more frequent. As you can see, last year alone, 21 typhoons have hit Philippines. Last week, we have a feedback from our Indonesia side. There were a 6.2 magnitude earthquake happened just 30 kilometers away from our side. When I talked to my team, they told me they can feel the earth is shaking, when the earthquake happened. So you see, to address to the situation like this, our experienced engineering team will assess and analyze the local requirement in the region and design the Rack Clad warehouse accordingly. Starting from the heavy-duty anchoring system, which is extremely important because we need to address the loading and the pulling force from the supporting heavy-duty frame. Is what you can see here, where the people is assembling the frames accordingly on site. Yeah, and then to the complete set of bracing tower of the Rack Clad structure for the total system stabilizing purpose. Due to the impact of soil, wind, earthquake, and different local authority requirement, we need to address every project differently because of these variances.
I see, Chan. And another question for me again. So if two projects require the same amount of storage capacity and they use the same type of pallets, and however they are located in two different locations, can we assume the Rack Clad designs would then be different?
You got a point, Alison. This is absolutely right. Geological phenomena are the key element in the Rack Clad warehouse design. Warehouse next to the sea or river sometimes could be changed the key design criteria and would be totally different for two projects with a similar loading weight. This is largely due to the soil type and influence of the surrounding facility. Basically, no two projects are similar. Even with the same loading weight, the condition will still be influenced by the different soil type, wind speed that will change the profile selection and steelwork connection details. The complete comprehensive static analysis report using the standard and code of reference will be needed accordingly.
Right, Chan, it seems like Rack Clad concept isn't that simple after all. Perhaps you can help us to better understand these basics quickly.
In this case, let's look into the concept of the Rack Clad quickly. In summary, a Rack Clad starts with a fully connected single block rack structure. Since it is a purpose-designed solution that connects the racking elements such as racking frames, loading beam, roof trusses, gable wall, and the spacious steelwork all together, it will become a complete stable single block of racking structure which will take the impact of wind and earthquake according to the different local standard requirement. As you can see, the elements such as roof trusses, wall, roof supports that are usually part of the building scope. We are now integrate them into our Rack Clad solution to make it more cost-effective than a rack solution within a building.
Okay, so that means no building columns, and which also means no wastage of pallet locations.
Yes, there's no building columns. Then this will bring me to my second point. You do not need to consider the clearance between rackings, building columns, and building walls. The steelwork boundary now become the footprint, and the space needed for the columns are now made available to us easily. We can easily translate this space to more pallet positions. My third point, since the conventional building would usually make use of a long span of unsupported roof truss. These trusses are normally made from a hot roll profile, which are bulky and heavy. Instead, Rack Clad use racking to support this additional element. This means both loading weight on the floor and roof will be distributed to more upright supports and will benefit the structural design with more efficient use of steel.
But Chan, why does it matter whether the weight distribution is spread across the entire roof?
Well, I would like to share one incident that happened in 2014. Volcano Kedut in Kediri, Indonesia erupted, causing the volcano ashes drift across Java and accumulate on top of our customer warehouses. It's about half a meter high of volcano ashes on top of the roof. The rain made the situation worse. The ashes absorb the rainwater and become an additional load to the roof truss. A lot of conventional warehouse roof collapsed due to this volcano ash and rain accumulation issue. However, those Rack Clad warehouse roof did not collapse, since the extra load was evenly distributed to the racking with the cross supporting pitch.
I mean, this is very true, Chan. So in conventional concrete building, we have very few columns that takes the entire load of the structure. And this is not the case for Rack Clad buildings. I mean, because every upright in the racking is going to share the load. Is that right?
Exactly, Ram. You got the point. Since the roof truss is fixed directly above the racking frames and aligned to the racking bay pitch, the Rack Clad structure would take into consideration of the opening and load for M&E services in the design. For example, sprinkler system, smoke control system, temperature control system, and the needed ducting accordingly. These roof trusses are not normally made from a high tensile cold form profile instead of hot rolled steel. This gives us more flexibility to use a lighter profile to integrate M&E services and the opening to be considered onto the roof trusses, steel structure, and wall penetration accordingly.
Well, thanks, Chan. That was a very good walkthrough on the basics or concept of Rack Clad. So it seems like Rack Clad building structures, they are structured like a building, except that it's completely filled up with racks and of course, zero space wastage. So moving from flexibility to space utility, I pose this question to Ram, right? How do you measure this and include the right automated storage systems in this facility itself?
Yeah, sure. So from automation perspective, it is most often complicated when you need to plan a storage system inside a building. Why? Because of the pillars. Because we need to make sure that the pillars doesn't interfere with the movement of the cranes, or it doesn't interfere with the position of the conveyors. And also you need some kind of a gap or a clearance between the pillars and our components. I mean, all these are wastage of space at the end of the day. And all this can be eliminated in a Rack Clad building. Right? I mean, we have done a small comparison here, as you can see on the screen. It's a comparison between an in-house ASRS and a Rack Clad building. So both have the same plot size of 100 meters by 70 meters and at a height of 35 meters. And both have the same solution, which is a double deep ASRS solution. And as you can see, a Rack Clad building is able to achieve 10% more locations compared to the in-house ASRS building. I mean, this is only a rough comparison, taking into account of the pillars or the column in the building.
Ram, on top of what you shared, I've seen in some instance, we can also achieve 20% or more better location in a Rack Clad solution if the project is located in a high seismic zone area.
True.
Reason being, during the seismic activity, there will be a sway in the building, and they will sway inside the building. to avoid collisions, we need to consider at least a few hundred mm, or sometimes can be up to half a meter gaps for very high and tall warehouse between the building and the racking. As the size of the wall need to consider as well. If you take all this into account, we could potentially have up to 20% or more location inside the Rack Clad facility where you don't have such issue.
Okay, so I understand in city-states like Singapore or even in Hong Kong, space is scarce, but other countries in Asia, such as Philippines, Thailand, or even India, where there is no lack of land space, should they still be considering a Rack Clad solution?
Okay, I mean, that's a very good question. But with the current globalization and massive growth in urbanization, businesses want to be closer to the customers more than ever, especially for the last mile operation. I mean, we talked about e-commerce before. So when you take big cities like Mumbai or Jakarta or Manila, it is more or less similar to Singapore or Hong Kong in terms of land space. Therefore, a Rack Clad solution is still suitable for these countries. I mean, the projects we realized in Manila is a very special one, especially because of the challenges that we faced in terms of realization. And Chan was heavily involved in it. So maybe he can explain more in detail of how he was able to realize those projects.
Sure. We have built two 45-meter high cold store warehouse in Manila. One of them is being used to provide proper storage for the COVID-19 vaccines. In terms of realizations, we were faced with a few challenges. One being the site is about 300 meters away from the earthquake fault line. And the other one was to increase the wind speed consideration up to 270 kilometers per hour during the project implementation stage. But somehow we were able to tackle these challenges and provide a successful installation to our customer. They are more competitive since the footprint is kept as compact as possible. On the other hand, we are using the maximum airspace that is possible. All of them have seen a good 30% reduction in construction time and give them a great advantage being closer to their customer.
Thanks, Chan, for sharing about the two projects we had in Manila. So back onto Ram, on the automated system itself, can you share with us some examples of how SSI SCHAEFER clients have leveraged on technical facilities to optimize their material flow in their warehouse operations?
Sure. I mean, when you imagine an automated highway warehouse, the first thing that comes to our mind are these huge ASRS cranes that are running back and forth to store and retrieve the pallets. But there is more to it. I mean, the video I'm about to play is a stunning example of what else can be done inside a warehouse. The facility we built is for our trusted customer called JISC in Sweden. So we'll start with the inbound process. We planned an automatic stretch wrapper followed by an automatic labeler. So these repetitive processes are very beneficial for the customer in the long run. I mean, now let's see the video. Yeah, you can see the pallet is moving inside. So here you can see the automatic stretch wrapper followed by a labeler. And once it's done, it goes inside the ASRS. And one more point is it's always time consuming to bring the pallets up and down to different levels in a warehouse by use of cargo lifts. But when we plan a conveyor which are integrated with the lifters, the process becomes much more faster and smoother. And this is exactly what we have done for the customer. Now let's take a look at the video. Yeah, you can see here. So the pallets are brought to different levels by the lifters for processing. And one more interesting point about this project is that the cranes are able to handle both the standard European pallets and non-standard pallets, which are almost 2.4 meters in length and weigh almost 2 to 3 tons. And the crane technology that we use here is called double mast cranes, which are pretty useful in handling these kind of non-standard pallets or heavier pallets. As you can see, these are the 2.4 meter lengthy pallets, which are almost 2 to 3 tons. You can see that the same crane is able to handle 2 standard European pallets. So this is the biggest advantage for the customer. They can handle both these pallets in the same aisle using the same crane. So now it brings us to the picking stations. So let's see the video. And for this customer, they have to pick very heavy cartons. As you can see, this gorgeous lady is picking up a carton that's almost maybe 100 kilograms, and she's doing that effortlessly because of the vacuum lifters that is integrated or incorporated in the picking stations. So as a customer, it is for you to analyze the current situation in your warehouse and see how many hours are being spent by a worker to paste a barcode label onto the pallets, or maybe stretch wrap a pallet manually, or how many kilograms an operator is picking every hour, or what is the traveling time for the worker to get to the right product, and what would be the benefit if these things are automated inside the warehouse. So these are little things that can get you ready to future-proof your warehouse.
Hey Ram, can we incorporate these automation systems in a deep freeze environment?
Well, of course, yeah, obviously we can do that. The next example that I'm going to show you is for our customer Medibel, is a food and beverage client, is another trusted customer of SCHAEFER, and we built this beautiful facility for them in Belgium. And this facility itself is operating at minus 24 degrees Celsius. So as you can see, it's a channel storage system, and a channel storage system works flawlessly for customers who has less number of SKUs but needs denser storage. And the classic example is beverage industry. So with this system, it is also possible to handle first in and first out, because the channels in the middle can be accessed by both the aisles. Now there is another, so here we have the slaving and deslaving unit. So when it comes to pallets, there is a lot of factors that needs to be checked. Example, the material, the quality, the deflection, the dimensions, etc., before entering the ASRS system. So therefore, if there is a standard slave pallet inside the warehouse, the customer doesn't have to worry about what kind of pallets are coming inside the warehouse from the suppliers. So meaning to say that the pallets from the clients will sit on top of the slave pallets or the system pallets. And this process of putting a pallet on top of a slave pallet and vice versa can also be automated. And this is exactly what we have done for this customer.
Ram, when we talk about the safe pallet, our customers from PPL industry are very familiar with the system.
Yeah.
Not only in their warehouse, most often they handle different type of client. And this client can have different type of pallets. So to standardize, they often use a safe pallet inside their warehouse easily.
Yes, Chan. Yeah, I mean, 3PL is a very classic example for this operation. So moving on to the next reference, this is also a deep freeze facility for a customer called Dafcard. And he's a customer in Sweden, who's also a leading player in food industry. So as you can see, they built a warehouse next to the production facility. So to ensure a smooth transportation of goods from the production facility to the warehouse, they built a sky bridge to connect both these facilities. So these pallets can be transported by a long stretch of pallet conveyors. I mean, just imagine the amount of time that would take for the process to work if there is no sky bridge. I mean, so these kind of sky bridge is very useful for such operation. And as you can see, the conveyors are not on the ground, but rather placed on a mezzanine that's a few meters up from the ground. And this is also to make sure that the conveyors from the bridge are connected directly to the ASRS system and not to the lifters to bring the pallets up and down. So we always ensure that the customer gets the best solution in terms of future-proofing the warehouse.
Thanks for going through that two really nice facility, Ram. So while you were sharing these facilities, I noticed that there are no employees in there. So, it makes me wonder if this is what it is in there.
Exactly, Alison. Yeah. So this is what we are trying to plan inside the warehouse. No, I mean, whenever we hear the term robotics or automation, we imagine, this is how the warehouse is going to look like, which is not quite true. If you're thinking of robots taking over the world, like a Matrix movie, it's not as dramatic as you can imagine, but rather the images that you will see now are the reality. Yeah, the idea is not to remove the human operation from the warehouse, but to make the life easier for the operators working inside the warehouse. I mean, they should not worry about the tons of paperwork for every inbound and outbound operation, which is why we recommend a good warehouse management system in place. And they should also not worry about picking the wrong items. I mean, handling errors is a very tedious and a time-consuming process inside the warehouse. So with the sensors and the WMS that we provide, the errors can be minimized as much as possible. And last but not the least, the ergonomics. I mean, nobody wants their employees to report sick every month because of back pain or neck pain, which is why we design picking stations as ergonomic as possible, making sure the operator doesn't bend too much, doesn't lift too much. I mean, there is a lot that is taken into account when we formulate such a solution.
I see. And speaking of harmonizing material flow between machines and humans, right? I recall a local Rack Clad ASRS project that we both did for one of Singapore's homegrown service providers just a few years back. Was it one of the Singapore's biggest ASRS facility?
Yes, It was one of the biggest ASI facility in Singapore. Let's look at the video now. We start our work in an open air environment. First, put the racking frame and then assemble them become a racking blocks. All these assembly activities are done on the ground level. Once the structure is up, we stabilize it before we put up the higher racking blocks and then complete it with the roof truss installation. As you can see, a lot of activities happening on site, including the installation of the sprinkler system.
And Chan, these red pipes shown in the video, I assume these are the sprinkler pipes.
Wow, Alison, you really pay attention to the video. Yes. At the same time, you notice that these racking block modules are erected on the four-step, always built up in the form of triangle shape installation. This is to ensure the rack installation can continue safely with widely spread out base. Some projects might have been installed concurrently with the rack clad installation as well. Yeah, to a stage of minimum 2 main bracing towers set in length are properly installed and aligned, or allow 50% of the warehouse length is ready. Other installations such as wall, facade, and the M&E contractor can all begin their works concurrently. As long as the warehouse wall and roof is more than 50% covered, achieve watertight condition on the front zone where the conveyor system will be located. The storage retrieval machine from the remaining opening area can be installed as well, together with the conveyor system installation. The commissioning of the complete 18 set of crane and conveying system with more than 66,000 picket position can be achieved as per project plan. Thanks to our highly accurate manufacturing process, this also assures extremely accurate alignment, minimizing the time required to complete the plumbing and alignment of the racking for a 50-meter high rack clad structure like this. With early start of the rack clad installation and fast rack installation speed due to no lifting height constraint, when the rack clad roof and wall are fully covered, installation team and M&E contractor can start a system test and commissioning process way earlier compared to an indoor warehouse solution. This enables us to complete this mega rack clad warehouse close to 4,000 tons of steel, including roofing and wall cladding works in just 9 months.
Well, I mean, that is a really remarkable facility. And another question, Chan.
Yeah.
If a rack clad structure like this is already built, how possible it is to expand the warehouse infrastructure in the future?
This is a good question. We will use an example to show how a project can carry out with an expansion plan in phases. It can be immediate or with a few years interval. Both can be achieved with a rack clad solution. This customer built the first warehouse next to their existing plant. While we are completing the first warehouse, customer continue the plan with second warehouse. This can be done by just using back the second. Most important, the whole site looks clean and very organized compared to the conventional way of building. This is because all components are prefabricated in our factories, and we only carry out the assembly and erection works on site with our professional site management team. With current pandemic situation, the traveling and available resources become a new challenge we need to face on the project execution. Our local SSI SCHAEFER office will play a very important role to ensure the availability of resources to the project. With their local presence and contacts, we can work out the mitigation plan to address to these challenges.
Well, I'm sure that the project management team is very crucial here, isn't it? So before we go into the details, right, Chan, maybe you can share with us, how does your team or your project team typically work with clients on a facility this huge?
I'm very proud to say our project managers are all International Project Management Association, in short IPMA trained. We always refer to project management triangle as our guide, which contribute to scope of work, cost or resources available, and the project time schedule. This is a typical flow of how our project team manage the project with their client, their consultant team, and the supplier. First, before the first meeting, the customer and their main consultant, normally an architect, sits together to build the criteria for overall warehouse plan. Next, at the scope and interface joint meeting, the suppliers such as automated system integrator, Rack Clad specialist, silver builder will come together to define the individual scope of works and address project issues related to architecture, M&E services, automation system, and the main building works. Once all stakeholders agree on the implementation process and timeline, the customer and the consultant team will proceed to work with everyone and orientate the team towards the.
Thanks for sharing with us a little bit on how it works, Chan. And is Rack Clad warehouse then suitable for everyone, regardless of which market sectors they are from?
Pretty much everyone can use a Rack Clad warehouse. Ram and I have put together a simple checklist for anyone to evaluate the possibility of Rack Clad in their future expansion plan. First, a project with clear business vision and planning would be very critical since it integrates different suppliers from facilities, services, and warehouse automation system. Usually, we will all be aligned to a customer ultimate visions. Second point, a strong project management team is needed, not just from the supplier. Client-owned project management team will be empowered to ensure they can align and orientate the team towards the company mission. The supplier are coordinated closely to propose a plan for concurrent installation before the actual work starts. Do expect a lot of regular coordination meetings need to address design and site matters for detailed installation interface during the planning and project execution stage. Third, work with your own trusted solution provider who have the track records in delivering solutions in your country or region. Due to the massive size of this Rack Clad project, you will need very experienced suppliers who are able to mitigate the potential issues that may arise from design stage, installation stage, all the way to project handover. Fourth, since the different countries hold different local policy and have different rules and regulations, experienced supplier can work closely with clients to implement local policy accordingly. For example, some countries do require local accredited checker to verify the static calculation and give approval for local authority submission. Just imagine this. If the accredited checker are not familiar with the Rack Clad solution, because to some of them, this is a brand new concept, you will need a lot of patience and time to work with the local checker on the concept and details. This sometimes can be very, very tedious.
Okay, so let me continue from the fifth point on. From the automation perspective, the solution depends heavily on the data. Therefore, the customer, if he is planning to build an automated facility, he should start gathering his warehouse data for at least 6 to 12 months. And another fear the customer faces is the automation user-friendly. I mean, this is normal. Just like when we switch from Android to Apple, we get anxious about the user interface, right? So, but once you're exposed to the technology, within a week, you get comfortable with the device. I mean, of course, it's not as simple as that, but more or less the concept applies to the warehouse automation as well. So the customer who are willing to invest in automation should be ready to invest in training their employees as well. So we in SSI SCHAEFER have well-rounded training programs. Once the system is installed, our SSI technicians normally stay for 2 to 4 weeks at site to support the customer after installation. We call this as ramp-up support, some kind of training to the customer's employees. And the products to be, number 7 is the nature of products. So the products to be stored inside the warehouse are equally important as data. I mean, some pallets which are not of standard dimension can be an issue, but nevertheless, we can find a solution to tackle this problem by either having slave pallets or system pallets like what we talked before, or other alternatives. And number 8 would be the basic ERP system. I mean, IT is one of the key points for the customers to take note of. So when we design an automated facility, it is controlled by a highly sophisticated warehouse control system. And this warehouse control system needs instructions from the customer. Therefore, it is important that the customer has an ERP system in place which makes communication work.
All right, thanks, Chan and Ram. There was a really big checklist for our audience here who are interested in building a Rack Clad automated warehouse itself. So before we go, I've always asked our speakers on AI45 to share your golden ingredient that you put into the recipe of logistics automation. So maybe Chan, we can go first. Are there some advices that you can share with our audience here who might be interested in investing in Rack Clad automated warehouse?
Since we have just gone through the big checklist just now, so I will keep to my advice short. Yeah, as we mentioned before, a Rack Clad project are generally a large-scale project with high capital investment. You will need a financially strong and reliable partner who has the know-how for a variety of the Rack Clad solution, technical experience, and professional team in project implementation. This way, your Rack Clad automation experience will be less stressful and potentially risk-free.
Thanks, Chan. And how about Ram? What will be your advice for our audience to prepare ahead before they invest in Rack Clad solution warehouse?
Yeah, sure. I mean, just like these valued customers that who have trusted us with this Rack Clad automated warehouse to SCHAEFER worldwide, I would advise the customer to start thinking about data seriously. And order data for the past 6 to 12 months will give us a good idea on how the operation is being run inside the warehouse. And this is without a doubt one of the most key criteria for a successful solution. So if you're thinking of automating your warehouse, start gathering data. And lastly, engage a professional service organization, either internal or external, to support the entire life cycle of the system.
All right, so thank you, Chan and Ram, for your valuable time in joining us on the Automation in 45 Minutes webinar produced by SSI SCHAEFER Asia. So it was incredibly insightful to have heard from the both of you on the design and building of automated Rack Clad warehouse in today's logistics environment. In our next episode of AI45 webinar, we will be touching on the topic of semi-automatic warehouse and the technologies around these solutions. So for more information and episodes, please visit ssischaefer.com or subscribe to more webinars on the website. Finally, you can find us on social media at SSI SCHAEFER. And that's all we have for today's session, and I will see you at the next one. Bye.
Bye.